European castles. What is a castle? During the Middle Ages, many castles were built across Europe. The castles were made to protect people from their enemies. Their thick, tall walls with watchtower or guards stood watch over the castle. The people who owned the castle were the nobles. However, they were not the only people living in the castle. The people who served and protected the nobility also lived within the castle walls. The nobles were not only owned and lived in the castle, so uh, we also we also owned much of the land stretching beyond the castle. They helped the king control the land. Living outside the castle was another class of people called commoners. They were the craftsmen and farmers who lived in small towns and villages and on farms not far from the castle. In exchange for living on nobles' land, the commoners farmed the land and paid taxes to support the castle. The first tile castle was called Moss and Belly. The moat was a high mound of dirt with wooden tower built upon it. A wooden fence called palisade was built out from the moat. The palisade formed a wall surrounding a belly, or the yard. They held the kitchen, hall, stables, and another building belonging to the noble. Later castles had stone moats or towers. Many of these castles featured moats. Moats were ditches, often filled with water, and surrounded the castle. As the time passed, castles were built with bigger towers and walls. They became larger, with more rooms and passages. It began to look more and more like the large castles we see today. These castles were well built and have withstood a test of time. Outside the castle, newly built castles were painted in a mixture of lime and water. This mixture gave the castle walls a fresh, clean coat of white. For this reason, the mixture was called whitewash. Every castle's design was different. Still they had many of the same features. Most had tower turrets. Many castles had an inner and outer wall. Many also had a very strong building in center of the castle. This building was also a keep, called a keep. Many castles were built in places that people made them easier to defend. They were built in the middle of lakes or jagged hilltops and cliffs. This made it hard for attackers to reach the castles. The walls were often more than 3 meters thick. They were topped with crenellation. That gave them saw-tooth look. The design protected archers from enemy arrows. It also made it more difficult to climb over the walls. The primary entrance was through the main gate, but often there were smaller gates around the castle walls. Smaller gates were used for extra traffic or for deliveries to the kitchens. Castles had many windows to let light in. This meant the fuel candle and torches would be needed to light the rooms and halls. Windows near the ground were extremely narrow so that attackers could not climb through them, since windows high above the ground were difficult to reach. They could be bigger. Most of these larger windows had shutters to keep out bad weather, and often had bars to keep invaders out. The roof and floors were made of hard wood. Many castles had cellars that were used to store food and wine. After the Middle Ages, dungeons were built in castle cellars. These dungeons were used to house prisoners. Inside the castle was designed just to be defended. They were also designed to make life comfortable for the nobles. One of the most important places in the castle was the Great Hall. It was more a it was where meals, entertainment, and feasts were held. It was also where anyone gathered or talked or held meeting. The kitchen was separated from the great hall by long passageways. Some kitchens were outside another building to avoid the of castle risk of the castle's wooden roofs catching fire. This meant that food for the medievals feast could arrive at the tables cold or wet with rain. A castle had enough room to house the noble and their extended family. Visitors probably slept on straw mattresses in the great hall after tables were cleared away. Most castle has spiral staircases that wound upward the clockwise direction. They were built this way to slow down invaders by making it difficult to fight. In the stairwells built for defense, one of the most important things to consider the castle design was defense. A castle usually has two surrounding walls. The inner wall was taller than the outer one. Archers standing on the inner wall could fire their arrows over the defenders' short wall. It also made it easier for those on the taller wall to defend against attackers who had reached the lower outer wall. Two sets of gates on these walls often opened at opposite ends of the castle. This forced invaders to circle around the inside of the outer wall to find the other gate. While looking for the second gate, invaders could be hit by the castle guard's arrows. Between the castle walls were the outer and inner wards. The outer ward was fixed with shops and houses. The inner ward was where the food and weapons were stored. The knights stayed and water well were docks. The center of the castle was separate building called the keep, and it here that the nobility lived. It was the safest part of the castle and hardest to enter. It was designed so that if the rest of the castle were captured, the noble could still be defended. People in and around the castle during the Middle Ages revolved around the church. People believed that God gave the king power to rule. The church had at least much power as the king. It represented by authority that gave the king to his right to rule. Under the king and between them were several other classes of people. The higher class were the nobles. They paid the king a tax for the privilege to control the land and his kingdom. The knights also ranked high in the kingdom. Below the knights there were merchants and artisans, and below were the craftsmen and peasants such as blacksmiths and farmers. And all these people paid taxes to the nobles. Some were allowed to hold land. The lower class was the peasants. They had remained on the land they were born, where they were born. Peasants did not own land. The farmer gave much of that they produced to the king and landowner. A peasant life was tough. To pay high rents, the nobles were hit worse during times of hunger, wars, and illness. Many rebellions occurred due to the peasant unhappiness with the nobles, but these were almost always shut down by the ruling class. Castles and wars. Castles were targets of many long-running wars. Sometimes they were built around entire towns. The peasants would defend the town wall or as long as they could. If the town walls were overrun, the knights would defend the outer wall of the castle. If it fell, the inner wall was defended, and lastly the central building or keep that housed the noble was defended. Defending the castle was not easy. Enemies had used weapons to try to take over the castle. They used large battering rams to hammer away at castle walls and gates. They used weapons like catapults or hurl rocks, debris, and even dead animals or people over the walls. Giant slingshot-like weapons and trebuchets that also used to hurl objects over the wall and discourage the defenders from rushing out the castle to attack them. The attacker used giant crossbows mounted on carts. But the method used to keep attacker from entering a castle. Holes were cut into floors of archers above the entrance. Defenders poured burning sand toward anyone trying to batter down the gates. Newer castles replaced arrow slits with keyhole-shaped windows where cannons could be replaced. The moats often filled with water surrounded the castle. It was difficult to tunnel under the moat. The attacker could not wade across the deep water. Underneath the crocodile played in some moats. Some roosted up eel and other kinds of fish, using them for food. There were no crocodiles. Often it was not possible to break into a well-built and defended castle. The attacker would simply wait for the castle resident to run out of food and water. Around 1600s, castles became less and less popular, so they were no longer easy to defend because they used heavy cannons and warfare. The noble also wanted more comfortable and open places to live. Still, many castles stand today a reminder an age gone by.